We have spoken to you about various issues related to the crisis that the Earth is experiencing. And we have spoken about the concepts of energy and how you would use energy and how you would obtain energy. We have spoken thus far to you about such things as fracking and natural gas and electric and water power and even such as solar and wind power and nuclear. But these ways of obtaining power are not the only issues when you speak of the various crises that the Earth is facing, and they're not the only solutions. For it must also be realized that the solutions come with technology, with architecture, with building and manufacturing. And of these, one of the most important is the designs that are used in both building of homes and buildings and cities, and inclusively the designs that are used in manufacturing. So it is important to speak to architecture, to design, to layout, to fabrication. Now, much of fabrication in the future, as it is already, is to be robotic or automated. And this is a natural course for the best results to be able to utilize minimal energy in the production of various goods that will be necessary. But design includes the layout of cities. It includes the shape of homes and houses or buildings and office complexes. So first, think about the overall design of many things. Let's speak of homes, whether they be on solid ground or whether they be floating or whether they be island homes. Homes should be not only economical, so they are affordable, but they must be ecological, so they are livable and sustainable for the future. One of the issues with the way that housing is currently built is the fact that it, instead of adding to the earth, becomes a placement or ornament up on the earth. And in this way, it actually disrupts the natural rhythms of the earth, the biological and natural rhythms that are part of the earth. There are various kinds of construction, whether you speak of geodesic or whether you speak of earthen berms or whether you speak of larger structures that do not do this, but rather contribute to the earth. Office buildings, even apartments and homes, can allow for a continuance of nature by allowing places within these for the nurturing of both flora and fauna. For example, you may have a building. Within that building structure, you utilize specific spots where you can have plants that will provide, so the towering building actually becomes towering plant life. And by doing this, you also then provide nesting sites for birds, you provide for various animals and insects to be able to be a part of that structure. But these things cannot simply be done willy-nilly, because if you put large plants into a building, the roots will cause damage. So these have to be done with concern and have to be done with an idea towards balance. But you can take a building and you know what the square footage of that building is. You know how many trees would have been displaced in the natural environment, or how many shrubs or whatever. And then you can scale the building so that as you build it up, you are able to add equal or even more plant life to that building's exterior in a way that will then allow it to contribute to the environment rather than taking away from the environment. But further, when you are designing the many things that you would design, these structures, you should take into consideration also their use. So if such is to be for home use, you may wish to think about how the water flows within the building, how the air flows within the building. Now, much of this is done, but it's done with the idea only of providing comfort for the individual. It's not done at this moment with the idea of ecological impact, which is important and in some ways may even add to community. For example, if you have independent home structures, but you have extended family living within that, you may share a communal cooking area. Or you may find that you would have a structured area that would not be as ecologically unsound for bathing and showering, while providing such privately, such could also be provided communally. It is really an idea that must be approached for the future, because as you increase the population, you must also increase within that population a way of feeling together and closeness. So when you design, you're not only designing for ecology and for economics, but you're also designing for the mental well-being and the emotional well-being of the occupants within that home. And as the population grows, it becomes ever and ever and ever more important for the family units to be extended so there can be small groups where there is true sociological binding. This is just a necessary part of humanity. Now, speaking of these technologies and buildings, we have already told you that corrugated and dimpled materials would be much stronger for the future and would provide more surface area, as would be needed not only to strengthen structures but to enhance their energy efficiencies in various ways, whether it be solar intake or otherwise. And we have explained to you that designs would require in some areas for the ability for walls or even areas for homes or towns to be able to rise and fall with the tides. We have also told you that there are more obscure or esoteric ideas that should go with building. Now, let's elaborate on this just a little bit, because this comes to the design, the layout of whole communities and whole office areas and entire towns and cities. Because how you structure these, the way that you turn your buildings, the way your buildings are shaped, the direction your streets lie, this determines the sun, the amount of sun that is taken into structures. It affects and impacts the wind flow and can affect the water flow when it rains or when there is precipitation such as snow. But on top of all of that, what is never taken into consideration at the moment and is very, very major is the fact that these affect the high and low pressures systems that are in your atmosphere. And this is very important. And some things can be done very simply to change the impact that you have on these. But by being knowledgeable about this, you can build your buildings so that they have a reflective surface that can actually warm a town or a city or an area in cold times and can act to allow it to cool in warmer times by having a reflective surface that can be altered. And this is where the dimples and another spot where the ridges come into play. Such could be done simply with coverings over or under glass, but it can be done by things that move according to the way that they would roll. Say a tri-sided ridge that can be moved back and forth, and such would allow it to be angled to or away from the sun, having a dark side, a light side, a reflective side, a side that reflects energy, a side that absorbs energy, and a side that does a mix of both. That is, that would moderate the energy or diffuse it. This would impact the amount of heat put back up off of the structures. This would impact the weather in return, which means you could actually impact the amount of rain that would fall, or you could impact the storms that come into an area, or you could impact extreme heat. You could keep droughts from being as severe. Design is something that is a major must for the future. The designers of buildings individually will need to learn to work collectively so their designs work in unison throughout a village, a town, a city or community. This is just part of your future. So the engineers, the technicians, the architects of tomorrow are a major force in the ecology, in the emotional well-being of the residents, in the economics for the cities, in just the livability and the very environmental sustainability of future homes, businesses, and cities. this will also then, in turn, have an impact upon rural areas, in as much as if cities become able to control their environmental impact, do you not think that rural areas would be able to do the same with very specific structures put at very specific spots to help control such? And think of this. People do not think of this often enough, but how often do you hear of a trailer park or an area where there is asphalt being hit by tornadoes seemingly for no reason? But you got to understand that you are impacting the pressures, the high and low pressure in an area, and that these things, when randomly placed and just allowed to interact willy-nilly with the environment, create the havoc by actually causing it to manifest under right circumstances. For instance, you take a large trailer park in an area of asphalt. The heat is spinning up from it. You move a storm front into the area. You have the heat rising at a huge rate from this as you move that storm front in that suddenly cools and catches this rising air to spin and create a tornado, which in turn takes out the trailer park. And you wonder how this happened. What natural phenomenon caused it to happen? It was the natural phenomenon that you invited by building this environment altering set of circumstances. You need to take these things into consideration. Just think, because this means there is a reason for cities to be oriented to the sun. It is not sun worship. It is to allow the warmth in the proper time of year. There is a reason with your technology now that you can actually allow cities, or should we say the structures within those cities, to be able to move a little bit. And there is good reason to build things differently. Even the ancients realized that there was a need for give and play in all of their structures. But you don't do this anymore. You build things rigidly and then wonder why they cannot withstand earthquakes. And yet, you can look back thousands of years and find structures that still can stand in earthquake-prone areas because they were built with the proper focus of forces and with the proper give and take that is needed. So, if you are going to take one thing away from this message, take this away. That your architects, your designers, your planners for tomorrow's homes and offices and cities and towns are fabricating the future and must do so with the full knowledge of the impact that they have upon humanity's emotions and well-being and upon the ecological well-being of the earth for the benefit economically and socially of humanity. We leave you with blessings and with peace. Peace be with each of you.